March 2nd, 2020, Governor Jay Inslee announced that all Washington state restaurants would close. It devastated the hospitality industry. The medical industry was struggling, but it also devastated the hospitality industry. I felt like a knife had been shoved into my side because 20 years ago, I worked in the hospitality and the restaurant business. I studied to be a chef. I went to cooking school. I was really passionate about people in this business. And I felt horrible. I felt like my family was in jeopardy. And I wanted to do something about it. So one day I woke up with the idea that chefs need a voice. It was the beginning of the pandemic, and I knew that it was time to launch a radio show or a podcast. And I'd been hesitating for a long time, trying to find that purpose. And I was doing it through Toastmasters. So one day, I went to a seminar, an advanced seminar on pathways. And it was led by Kyle Hall, who was number 3 in the World Championship of Public Speaking out of District 32. And in the middle of the seminar, he said, is anyone working on a level 4 or level 5 pathways project? And I stood up virtually and I said, I'm excited about launching a podcast. He said, that's easy. Your level 4 is your podcast. Your level 5 is your high performance leadership project. He got me so excited. When I left, I was so inspired, but I didn't have a name for the podcast yet. And eventually collaborating with my wife and Linda Worthman from District 2, we came up with Voice4Chefs. My wife created a logo, and she's a designer and user researcher. And I formulated a high performance leadership project. And of course, I brought my wife into it. Linda Worthman, who I mentioned, is now currently our program quality director. Nan Hamilton, a life coach, and Kyle Hall. And we met for 5 weeks for about a span of about 2 months and created this vision around this launching of the Voice4Chefs podcast. And I was grilled by who's your audience? Why do they care? Who's going to listen? How are you going to find your audience? Who are your guests going to be? What's your purpose? All of these things came about. And it was an amazing journey. And I captured all this information through Otter, transcribed, and then summarized it and put it into Excel. And these were golden nuggets that I look back on as I launched and continued in the podcast. So it started out for finding guests. I would call local Seattle restaurants and talk to the restaurant manager or the owner and say, I'd love to interview your chef. And I'd wait a couple weeks and they'd eventually get back to me. And it was a very slow going process until I started getting moving in the podcast. And then eventually I would get calls from chefs in Seattle that were referrals that wanted to come on the show. Then about 6 months later, I joined Clubhouse online. It's an audio only app. And eventually found my way into a club called Food is Religion that was about 3,500 members worldwide. And I started speaking on Clubhouse and connecting all these people. All of a sudden, the podcast went from local to global because people from around the world started listening to the show. And then I met this amazing chef named Chef Mimi, who's a Michelin trained chef. And she said, I want you to be part of our Food is Religion group. I want you to host rooms and interview people and talk to people. So eventually I hosted a cooking show, an audio only cooking show, and interviewed chefs around the world. Those chefs now came on to the podcast and then connected me with other chefs around the world. So then it became a truly global podcast. Now, when I look back over just about 2 years, because I launched in May, I think it was May 1st, 2 years ago, what I've realized is that the mission, the vision, the values are all changing. And I'm posting this here, and I'll share this on Wednesday night with the coaches as well. But for me, it's about connecting to chefs that create value in the community. They give back to the community. A great example is Chef Maria Campbell, who runs Cooks Who Care in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I met her on Clubhouse. She created a nonprofit that helps with people in hospitality. She gives them funds or raises funds so that she can provide them care and people who struggle with mental health, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, to help them improve their lives and get them the care that they need. And those are the purposeful chefs that I really feel connected to with the Voice4Chefs podcast. That's what my niche is, if you will. And I'm really excited about that. So I'm trying to reshape the mission, vision, and values around that. And I could use your help. On Wednesday night, I'm going to be grilled by the coaches, and I'm ready and I'm excited and I can't wait. And hopefully you'll be there and you could share some feedback either in this forum or through our coaching call. But the last thing I want to share is that I'm turning this into a keynote that I want to take around the world in Toastmasters to inspire other people to launch their own podcast and share their message with the world.